to this special episode of Storyboard dedicated to Curious Design Yatra 2016. Storyboard attended the 11th edition of Design Yatra held at Jaipur this year, and we caught up with various interesting delegates here. This episode is all about bringing in some interesting conversations from this event. First up, we have Michael Johnson, founder Johnson Banks. Michael has worked with about 8 agencies before starting his own design consultancy, Johnson Banks, in 1992. After setting up his own business, he has successfully worked on various brands such as DC, Acumen, Mozilla, and many more. In conversation with Storyboard editor Anant Rangaswamy, he speaks about his new book that explains the branding process, and he also speaks to us about the way in which marketers should go about the entire process of branding and what can marketers do right. Let's hear the full conversation.
Tell me about your book. That's a good way to start talking about anything.
Okay. Yeah, I've been working for a long time, about 2.5 years, on a book that would explain the branding process.
Right.
I realized quite a while ago that I'd been doing this job, rebranding and branding organizations, for quite a long time, and there was never really anything that you could refer to, like a core textbook or that would really help.
Samuelson in economics or something.
Yes, and then marketing. There's a famous book by
Kotler. Right. You didn't have this.
There isn't really a Kotler in the branding business.
So Wally hasn't done one?
Well, Wally wrote books that tended to be his opinion. It's like you can hear his
the
voice.
Word of God.
Yeah, well, you said that, don't you? He was my old boss, you know, and I loved Wally.
Right.
But I was thinking that maybe a book that explained it to both strategists and designers, both sides, would be really useful. Right. So that's what I started working on a couple of years ago. And then, because there are lots of books on strategy and lots of books on design, but very, very few. There's like 2 that go through the process.
Perhaps you've set it up well with the title of your book. You know, instead of saying, talking about the pretty part of the business, like advertising, communication, of the fluff. Yeah. You said problem solving. You're putting it up there, saying it's a problem.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, the new book is about branding and the steps of branding. So, branding in 5.5 steps. That is Problem Solving was my first book. Right. The new book is about the process. Right. And by saying there are these steps to the process, I'm just trying to make it easier. Right. So people go, okay, I understand. And also I'm trying to establish a bit of common language, because a lot of people, as you say, use very different language for the same thing. So if you take all the brand models, if you like, that people might use, if you layer them on top of each other, they kind of do the same thing.
So it's like a word cloud.
It's the most common. Yeah, and so I realized at a point, as I was researching the book, that at one point I was worried. I was thinking, I'm not going to find a way through this, because everybody talks about it in different ways. But really, when, like you do in Photoshop, you put everything on one layer on top of each other, you sort of end up with an overall image. Right. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe that's what I should do.
You know, advertising, whether it's a WPP company or a Omnicom company, they've still not become able to become a consultant.
No.
And from what I gather, everything that you do, whether it's pitching for the business or costing it or delivering, is more aligned to what a consultant does. Yeah. So tell me how you manage that, as opposed to falling into the trap of undercharging for your efforts. How do you convince the client that you deserve so much more than, say, Ray and Keshavan or somebody like that?
Okay, well, the advertising model for years, and still currently now, still sort of gives away strategy. Right. Yeah. And then once you're appointed, then you claw the money back by claiming a bit of media money, or putting a little bit of markup. We don't work like that at all. Right. We're completely transparent. Always have been. So that's always been a key difference between the design side of the business and the advertising side. So yes, sometimes people will go, hang on a sec, we're going to pay you 100 grand to sit in a room and talk to us and then write some words. You're kidding. So that might happen, but at least we're being honest with them. We're saying, well, look, it's 4 months' work. So you wouldn't go to your lawyer, or you wouldn't go to your accountant and ask your lawyer or your accountant to work for free for 4 months. We're just honest with them.
Absolutely.
There are some clients who can't handle it. No.
Right. Okay, tell me by your experience. I'll allow you to do a plug for yourself. Tell me the 3 or 4 clients who really get it, who understand the value proposition and the value that you bring to the table.
I think our clients and our potential clients have really started to understand the process, yeah. So we've been doing a big project in the UK for the DEC, who are a disasters and emergency body.
Right.
When there's a disaster or an emergency around the world, rather than Oxfam, Save the Children and British Cross all doing separate projects, they come together.
Right.
It's like an umbrella organisation. And before we rebranded them, they were, some people knew about them, but they really hadn't really got the story out very well, and they were very under-branded. And the work that we did for them, that was hard, because they have 14 agencies, 14 aid agencies that work for them, and then them. So we effectively had 15 clients.
Right.
It was very hard, but eventually we got them to agree. And what we've done for them has just been transformative. They raise 300% now for what they raised before. I mean, enormous amounts of money. We've been doing some really interesting work in the States, on the East Coast, for an ethical investor called Acumen, who a fascinating organisation, Acumen, who want to invest in innovative projects in India and Pakistan, West and East Africa, and they're growing around the world. But they don't want to dream up solutions to poverty or irrigation or whatever it may be, or energy. They don't want to dream up the ideas in New York. They want to go to India and Pakistan and find the ideas here. And all they want to do is help with money. Something like seed funding. It's a really fantastic model, you know, and we've done a lot of work with them, and it's a very interesting organisation. And most recently, we're working with Mozilla, who are probably best known for making the Firefox browser.
Right, absolutely.
And Mozilla are actually a non-for-profit, and people don't understand that. They think that they just make Firefox, and they do, but they do a lot of other things: advocacy, internet health, internet equality. So we're working with them. But the interesting part of that project is that because they do all of their software as open source, they asked us if we'd do the rebrand as open source rebranding.
Right.
So every stage of the branding process has been put online.
Right.
So the brand narrative and the first design concept, and last week the second design concept, are all online.
Right. One of the challenges today, especially with businesses like Acumen or whatever, is that the brand has to cut through all possible media, including media that might exist in the future.
Yeah.
You know, so how is that a challenge, and does it force you to hire younger people?
All of the different channels that the work we do now go through is astonishing, and sometimes there are moments where I think, oh my goodness, you know, how are we going to cope with this new challenge?
Right.
But then we cope with it, and then we go, oh yeah, no, we understand. Or we get a specialist in, and that's a specialist who's really good at social media or great at animation, or currently we're having to look at design solutions that you could code, that would work in a coded environment, rather than just a picture in the corner of the website. So yeah, that's a challenge. But it's interesting, there's always this new challenge in my business, and I just see them, or I always think of it like a hub and a spoke, like a bicycle wheel. You've got the idea in the middle, and then out come these spokes of all the things you want to do with it. And it's our job, obviously, to understand the spokes. But the bit in the middle, the idea, is the important thing.
Yeah. You know, go back 30 years, and you know, if you finished your job, the job was more or less finished.
Yeah.
You know, you could walk away from it, and the client need not call you for another 10 years. Now it's very different. You know, he might need to call you day after tomorrow because something new has come up.
Yeah.
So how do you contract it? Is it a one-time payment plus a monthly fee, or how do you work that out?
Well, we would tend to work out the main stages beforehand and estimate them and say it'll cost X.
Right.
And then yes, you're right. With certain projects, not all of them, but some of them, they are naturally going to extend. And then sometimes clients start giving us more and more projects, and we have to work out a retainer. But generally speaking, we just say, oh, okay, that's going to cost this, that's going to cost, and we do it sort of in an additional way. It seems to be hard for us to persuade our clients to do retainers. And they're really hard to manage, retainers, because you might be a month where you do no work.
Right, absolutely.
And then you go, well, should we bill them this month? You know, those kind of things. So
finally, the biggest challenge in your business, as opposed to, say, advertising, which is not too far, it's fairly clear who in the client side is responsible and going to pay the bill.
Yeah.
While design and branding could be dictated by a CEO, a CFO, a CMO. It could be anybody. In your experience, what makes the best client?
Well, I mean, we are normally contacted by a marketing or a comms team, but we we learned a long time ago that if we didn't go any higher than that, if we didn't go up, if we didn't get into the boardroom quickly, then the projects were going to fail, especially if you're trying to do a major change. And as we started to get better at talking in the boardroom, you know, as we really put design into the boardroom, or brand thinking into the boardroom, then we realized that people were listening. And rather than seeing it just as something you painted on at the end, or oh, now we need that guy to do a logo, now that people are starting to understand that it's corporate strategy and branding are intertwined, and especially if you do it in the scenarios the way that we do it. And once you get the chief exec in the chair and the board of trustees or whatever it may be.
You use the phrase once. How do you manage that? You said once you get the chief executive.
Well, you have to demonstrate it to them.
Right.
Yeah, you have to say. Usually that's where case studies will show people, well, look, this is where this company were, we showed them this is where they got. And if they just see it as something that is painted on at the end, then it's not going to work. And if we don't see the chief exec in the chair in our first investigation stage, then that's a big red flag to me. I would immediately think, well, why are we not seeing them? Right. Why are you hiding this project? I would say to the marketing team, or whoever it is. Right. I'm not trying to do marketing teams a disservice, because they are usually our day-to-day clients, and a great comms team, or marketing, whatever they call themselves, a great comms team is a great client, right. But if they don't have the backing of the people above them, then it's going to fail.
Okay, the final question is, you know, the pressure on marketers to deliver overnight today is worse than it ever was.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with them? I mean, it could be a great comms team which needs a solution by day after tomorrow. Yeah. How can you be their friend and yet do justice to all that you do?
That's hard, yeah. Usually, if the idea is strong, the core idea is strong, then we can react fast. Right. So if the project we're doing with Cambridge University, it's a big project, very difficult. We agreed a big theme, but we set up the systems and the design systems, so if they needed something fast, we could do it fast. And that's the ideal solution, that you can be nimble enough. Because what no client really wants is to say, hang on a sec, we paid 100 grand for this, and you're telling us it's still going to take 2 months to design the brochure. Yeah, they don't want to hear that. So you have to be able to respond quickly. Once all of the, if you like, the
heavy lifting is done.
Yeah. Once the manual is, then and actually we quite like that, because the ability to do something very quickly in response is quite good, because some of our projects take too long, really, and so we like to do something fast. Yeah.
Wonderful, and thank you for talking to us, and hope to see you back in India next year or the year after. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Lovely to meet you.
It is time for us to take a short break. We return with more action from Curious Design Yatra 2016.